And there we go. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. My name is Nora Mansfield. I'm an assistant director at the Polsky Center, overseeing venture programs and the George Shultz Innovation Fund. And of course, now our slides are having a little slow time. My colleague, Erica Mercer, is the Director of Entrepreneurship Programs in the Spider Private Equity Program at the Polsky Center, overseeing the full portfolio of private equity, venture capital, and entrepreneurship through acquisition programs. This program is supported both in the traditional track of the PEVC Lab and the San Francisco Initiative by faculty members Jason Heltzer and Ira Weiss. They are the professors of the VC section of the PEVC Lab and have been hugely supportive in building out this initiative with us, allowing students the experience to have on-site experience in the San Francisco area. So a huge thank you to both of them for their support of this program and participation in today's session. So a little bit about the PEVC Lab San Francisco Initiative. So let's start first with an overview of the PEVC Lab as a whole. This program has been ongoing for many years now through Booth and provides an incredible opportunity for students who have an interest in pursuing careers in private equity and venture capital. Within this program, there's an intensive internship at a PE or VC firm, complemented by an academic course taught in the spring quarter. This opportunity helps students gain firsthand experience, shaping their careers in industry in either private equity or venture capital. As the popularity of this program has grown over the years, so has our support from firms both locally in Chicago and now with the launch of new tracks as the example of the San Francisco Initiative more broadly. But with that said, it is a competitive process. This process requires application, screening, and interview of all student candidates from the firms that participate. And unfortunately, there's no guarantee of internships either paired through the lab or for extensions of internships that lead into the summer or full-time jobs. But it is an opportunity for educational and experiential immersion, working hands-on with firms both in the local Chicago area and more broadly in San Francisco now. So let's have a little comparison of the two programs. We have the traditional track, the Chicago-based PEVC Lab, with the new initiative of San Francisco. So we'll take this step by step to kind of break down some of the differences to help you identify what program is best for you. So first, stage. The PEVC Lab, traditional program based in Chicago, has opportunity for students to work with firms that are focusing on seed VC, growth equity, and buyouts. The Chicago-based program has capacity for between 110 and 120 students, all who have internships in the local Chicago area and enrollment in the spring course. The criteria for the local program is just general interest in private equity and venture capital, ideally with the intent to pursue a career in industry that can translate to any geography. The traditional lab is a 9-week commitment with potential to span either winter to spring quarters. Most often we see that students pair with internships in the traditional lab anywhere between January and February, but they can extend well into the spring quarter and oftentimes even, dependent on mutual agreement between the student and the firm, can extend into subsequent quarters and potentially even the summer. Both programs require 15 to 20 hours a week working with the firm. We are in a little bit of a different circumstance this year in that a majority of our internships through the Chicago program will likely be conducted remotely given COVID-19. And similarly with the San Francisco program, given the mandates of the university and restrictions of travel and the current scenario with coronavirus, those will all be fully remote internships. The intent of the PEVC Lab is to provide students with exposure to direct investment experience. This can range in anything from evaluating opportunities for investment and supporting with deal flow, to analyzing any issues faced by portfolio companies, supporting in the day-to-day, potentially following a deal from deal flow through execution. And that's the same for both the traditional program in San Francisco. There is reimbursement available for both programs. For the traditional lab, $500 of reimbursement is possible both for ground transportation, but in our current remote environment, it would be for additional educational materials and resources that may support in your internship experience. So a couple differences between the traditional lab and that of the San Francisco initiative, we'll quickly go over now. The San Francisco initiative focuses only on seed VC firms based in the Bay Area. This year, we are considering expansion, potentially to a couple firms in Los Angeles, which we'll go into a bit later. The criteria for the San Francisco initiative is much more targeted. We are looking for students who have a vested interest in pursuing VC in the Bay Area post-graduation or in the West Coast more broadly. Expressing this intent to pursue a career on the West Coast in VC is extremely important for candidates moving forward in this program. The internship timeframe is similar to that of the traditional lab, but will take place fully in the winter quarter. It is a 9-week commitment spanning the weeks of the winter quarter from January to March. And as mentioned previously, given the current restrictions of the university for travel and the remote nature that most of our partner firms in the Bay Area are working within, this year, the internships of those accepted to the San Francisco initiative will be fully remote, working hand in hand with your host firm to ensure that this is still a robust experience. So going into some of the details of the course. For students who are accepted both to the traditional lab with Chicago-based host firms and the San Francisco initiative, you will be registered into the spring course with the option to register in either the PE or VC section. The VC section, as mentioned, is taught by professors Jason Heltzer and Ira Weiss. The PE section is taught by Chris McGowan. This course is offered in the spring term from 6 to 9 p.m. on Tuesdays. Should we be in person this spring, you will look forward to having this incredible experience with our faculty in person at Gleacher Center, but there is a chance that the course may be remote. We're all kind of navigating that ambiguity, so stay tuned for that. As mentioned, there are 2 sections of the course, one with an emphasis on private equity, the other with an emphasis on venture capital. In a few circumstances, the sections, will combine for particular guest speakers and topics a few times throughout the course of the quarter. Both sections have a range of lecture content, discussions, case assignments, incredible guest speakers. I can assure you that the faculty work really hard to bring in their networks and provide exposure to our students of some of the best names in industry, both in private equity and venture capital. There are also workshops, student presentations, and mock negotiations, which is one of the iconic elements that rounds out the course. There are many networking opportunities, both in the traditional lab and San Francisco. We can assure you that though students will not be in person for the San Francisco initiative this year, our team is working really diligently to still provide you to the exposure, both of networking with fellow host firms that are part of the San Francisco initiative and providing you with access to the broader San Francisco West Coast investing community of Booth alumni. We'll be in touch with the students accepted into this cohort with a few additional details as to what this will look like, but we are working really diligently to preserve that element of experience for you. No bidding is required to register for the PEVC Lab course. Once you have confirmation of an internship matched through the lab, our team of the Polsky staff will automatically register you for the course and the section of your choice. The course is a requirement of participation in the program due to federal laws on unpaid internships. So please know that if you do pursue application of either the traditional lab or the San Francisco initiative, that your participation in the course in the spring is required. And unfortunately, auditing is not allowed for this course. The course is typically fully subscribed and, as mentioned, a very competitive program. So unfortunately, we are unable to provide the opportunity for students to audit. So the San Francisco Initiative, the reason that all of you dialed in to join us today, there are particular elements of eligibility and rules that are unique to the San Francisco Initiative. This program is open to full-time, first and second year students and part-time students that have flexible schedules. Unfortunately, XP students are not eligible for this program. International students are able to participate as well, both first and second years, but they must apply to secure work authorization prior to the start of their internship. This element is required and will be monitored closely by our team to make sure that we're staying within the criteria required for international students to participate in these internship opportunities. Another element that's required, unique to the San Francisco Initiative, is that we are really looking for students who have an earnest interest in pursuing VC as a career in the Bay Area or more broadly West Coast post-graduation. There will be unique questions on this application that help us understand your intent to pursue a career in this region and provide an additional background on what has inspired your pursuit of VC in the West Coast and why you've been drawn to this program. There are no prerequisites from a course perspective to participate in the San Francisco Initiative or the traditional PEVC Lab, though we do encourage students who are in pursuit of either of these programs or these careers more broadly to enroll in EFPE, Entrepreneurial Finance and Private Equity, and Commercializing Innovation, as we feel that the frameworks taught in both courses really support the endeavors of students who are pursuing these programs and these careers. Prior experience in private equity and venture capital are not required. The course is split 33% to 67% of those without prior PEVC experience. And we found that the experience in this program is really incredible leverage for career switchers to provide them with on-site exposure and experience in these direct investing environments to leverage transitions in their careers. Students who are pursuing the SFI program, again, must seriously be pursuing a career in the Bay Area post-graduation. You'll notice I've said that multiple times thus far in this presentation, and that just re-emphasizes that element of requirement and you know, what we are hoping to target for students who are participating. So being a data-driven institution, here are some of the metrics of last year's pilot program at a glance. In terms of application, we had 63 applicants total to last year's program with a 16% acceptance rate. The breakdown of that is we had 10 participants, of which 3 were international students, 6 of our participants were men, 4 were women, and 3 students had prior VC experience, while 7, a majority of our program, did not. We had 8 students who were accepted into the program from full-time first year program at Booth. We had 1 full-time second year and 1 evening student. So that gives you an idea of the demographic from last year's applicant pool, and I think speaks a bit to the competitive nature of this program given the 16% acceptance rate. So let's go into the application and selection process in a bit more detail, as I'm sure that's where all of your minds are going right now. The traditional PEVC Lab program will be matching after that of the San Francisco Lab. So let's go in chronological order. For those of you who are interested in the San Francisco Initiative, the deadline for application is Monday, October 12th at 10 a.m. The application will go live later this week, where you will be asked to submit your resume, short essay responses, and video submissions that include some San Francisco West Coast specific questions that help us understand you know, your pursuit of VC in this region. The resumes are then distributed to all of the firms that are participating in this program, and firms may select additional curated sets that help them understand your prior professional experience and additional skills that might better match their portfolios. At that point, it's in the hands of the firms. The firms are able to review these resumes and applications, to review your video submissions, and then reach out to candidates that they are interested in screening and interviewing. The target date for them to extend offers for the San Francisco initiative is November 9th. And that is so that students who are applying to this cohort have answers before the deadline for the traditional lab. So let's move it in that direction. In the case that you're not offered a position for the San Francisco initiative, fear not. You still have the traditional lab with internship opportunities in the Chicago area available to you. The deadline for that application is November 11th, again at 10 a.m. And that will be a little bit more of an abbreviated, but quite similar application in comparison to the San Francisco initiative. That application will require a resume, short essay responses, and additional multiple choice responses that give us a bit of visibility into your prior professional experience and your areas of interest as it relates to investment stage and industry focus. Similar to the San Francisco initiative, all firms will receive at least one resume set based on their investment stage. Students who apply to the traditional lab have the ability to rank their interests in seed VC, growth, and buyouts. And as such, resume sets that have complementary firms with those investment stages will receive those batches. An example of a seed VC firm: if you as a student applicant rank seed VC as your #1 choice, any firm that denotes an investment stage of seed VC will receive your resume set. Beyond that, similar to the San Francisco initiative, curated resume sets based on prior experience and industry focus can be made available. With the traditional lab, students also have the ability, given the wide range of firms that are a part of it, to denote 3 to 5 firms of particular interest that you want to ensure your resume goes to. Our team will make sure that we are respecting those interests and funneling the resumes to those firms of interest for our student candidates. And again, the selection process similar to that of the San Francisco initiative. Once the resume sets are distributed, it's in the hands of the firms. They reach out to the students, screen and interview, and will begin extending offers dependent on the needs of the firm in a timeline ranging from December to March. There are some firms who have needs presently in the winter quarter when they receive their resume sets and will hire in that timeline. Others are holding off until the spring quarter, so there's rolling acceptance to that program, again, contingent on the needs of the host firm themselves. So I'm sure you are all curious to know what firms will be participating in this year's cohort of the San Francisco initiative. We have a few firms returning from last year, but all firms that are participating thus far with a few pending include Better Tomorrow Ventures, a firm new this year, BMWI Ventures, returning from last year, Foundation Capital, again, returning from last year's pilot program, NeoTribe Ventures, new to this year's program, Sapphire Ventures, returning from last year, and Upfront Ventures, a new addition. As mentioned, we have 1 to 2 additional firms that are pending, but we'll make all of that information readily available to student applicants on our website. So, program timeline. As you'll see, today, September 29th, we are all here together on our fateful platform Zoom, learning about this program and the application process. The application will open and be accessible to students on our website on October 1st with a deadline of October 12th. At that point, as mentioned, the screening and interview process with host firms will be conducted between October 19th and November 9th. During that window of time, you can anticipate hearing from firms for interviews and negotiations, but we ask that firms have their decisions made by November 9th to allow students the opportunity to apply for the traditional lab should they not be accepted into the San Francisco initiative. We have a mandatory orientation for all students accepted into the cohort, where we have an opportunity to meet with the faculty and our staff at the Polsky Center overseeing this program to answer any questions that you may have and prepare you for this experience, knowing that this will be happening prior to that of the PEVC Lab course in the spring. Between January and March is when students will be interning with firms. Traditionally, this would have been on site where we provide a stipend for you to travel and reside a few days a week in San Francisco. I apologize that our current circumstances have not allowed that in this year, but I can assure you that the firms that have signed up are still going to provide you with a truly robust experience, and you'll still be working really hard. We require that all students during this timeline intern actively with their firms for 10 to 20 hours a week, and we're sure they'll keep you pretty busy. Between April and June, the spring quarter, you'll be taking the course with our faculty, and that will be the culmination of your experience. So some student testimonials, we'll let these quotes speak for themselves. Last year, we had students who had truly incredible experiences and were able to immerse themselves both in their host firms and the broader San Francisco venture community. Charlie Campbell was one of our interns with GGV in last year's program. And as you can see from his testimonial, had a really incredible experience that extended for him into the summer. Charlie will be on our student panel here shortly. So rather than reading his quote for you all, I'll let him speak for himself in a moment. And additionally, we had Patrick Harmon, another candidate from last year's program, interning with BMW iVentures, who had a really incredible experience as well, being able to participate in live deal execution and form relationships with Bay Area VCs. Unfortunately, Patrick was unable to join us this afternoon, but he, along with a few others on today's call, will be supporting this year's cohort in the capacity of a mentor, being connected to students who are accepted this year to kind of guide you through the experience and provide advice from their experience in last year's program. So that gets me to this now. We have the SFI Mentor Program that will be launching this year, bringing back members of last year's cohort to serve as mentors and support those accepted into this year's program. We understand that the virtual context changes the game a bit, but these students will do their best to still provide you with advice both on your internship experience and how to plug into the broader San Francisco community. Many of these interns had to pivot from in-person work to remote work during their experience last year. So they'll have a combination both of advice to provide you for future in-person internship experiences, but also how to navigate this new virtual context and still make your presence known and really make an impact with your firm. So without further ado, I'd like to open it up first to our faculty, Professor Ira Weiss and Professor Jason Heltzer, for them to provide any additional context that they might want of the program before we dive into our student panel and Q&A. For students who have questions that you'd like elevated both to the students and faculty, I welcome you at this time, if you haven't already, to put those into the chat function. Following the faculty's remarks, we'll introduce our panel of students and segue into Q&A to learn a little bit more about their experiences and answer any questions that we might have from those in our Zoom audience. So Professors Weiss and Heltzer, I'll welcome you off mute to share any additional remarks you may have.
Okay, cool. Ira, I beat you off of mute, so maybe I'll go first. Hi, I'm Professor Heltzer. This is my 19th year as a venture investor. Before all that, I was a software engineer. And this will be my 10th year teaching the class as a professor. The prior decade to me being the professor, I taught in this class as a guest lecturer. So I have a lot of experience with the class and excited to be teaching it for my 10th year. One of the things I want to emphasize about this class is that it is very, very focused on tactical and experiential learning that you can apply in your internship. And while SFI, the SFI experience is before the class, you'll be armed with a lot of your experiences from that internship, and for some of you it will still be going on for you to apply and to learn in a much deeper level the stuff that we're teaching in the class. I can't tell you how many times I have former students who email me, whether it's in a summer internship, their internship during the class, or many, many years later, that they are putting to use the tools that they have learned in the class. And so we're really, really focused on that because this is an apprentice business. And what we want to provide to our students is to provide you with the tools that will allow you to accelerate in your ascent to being partners by providing you with some of the shortcuts that is a distillation of both Professor Weiss and my experience working in the industry. Ira, anything to add?
Not that much to add. I mean, I think, you know, I'll maybe talk specifically about the San Francisco program, and I know Nora talked a lot about this up front, but generally when we think about this program, it really is for primarily students who either came from the Bay Area before and have a little bit of a local network, or have like a very, very purposeful reason to be back in the Bay Area. You know, we have a wider program for, you know, the private equity venture capital lab. And I think here, you know, especially this coming year where it's all going to be remote, the closer the connections you have to the Bay Area, I think you know, the better this program will suit you for this year. I think it is possible that we may take a firm here or there that is not San Francisco based this year, just because everything is virtual. But when you think about the firms that we've recruited that are specifically on the San Francisco, you know, that are specifically on this list, and the firms that, you know, the panelists worked for last year, I think really, really, if you don't have a close tie into the Bay Area already, or have like an extremely compelling reason to go there, I would skip this and apply to the regular venture capital lab. So.
Thank you both. We really appreciate your remarks and perspective. I'd like to now pass it over to our student panel to introduce a couple of the students who participated in last year's pilot program. I'll kick it off with an introduction to Charlie, and then I'll let each of you kind of pass the baton to one another in the order of these photos. Charlie Campbell was one of the students who was a participant in last year's pilot. He interned with GGV, and as you can see, extended his internship both into spring and summer with that firm. Charlie, if you want to come off mute and share a little bit about your experience before making an introduction to Annie, that would be great.
Cool, thanks. Well, Professor Heltzer, I've been preparing my interesting fact for this meeting for a year now, and I'm a little disappointed that we missed it. So I guess things do change in a virtual environment. At any rate, so GGV was like an incredible experience. You know, before school, I didn't have any venture experience, so I was very green. I didn't have the coursework, and I had worked in sort of startups and entrepreneurship. And they were just very gracious with how much I don't want to say held my hand, because they definitely didn't, but they gave me a lot of opportunities to sort of go out on a limb and grow, and to learn about what it means to be an early stage investor, and how to think about technology and investing. So overall, I mean, I was practically like tenured by that point. It felt like when I ended at the end of September, but it was a great experience. I'm happy to share more about it, kind of how I got there, kind of in the following Q&A, but it was great.
I can go ahead and, yeah, thanks, Nora. Yeah, so my name is Annie. I was with Battery Ventures in the winter, and then rejoined them also over the summer. Ira and Jason, I'm still talking with Chelsea and kind of getting her to rethink also about coming back into the program this coming year. So we'll see if they're in the 1 to 2 kind of TBD list. You know, I would say I really enjoyed my experience in the lab and also in the class. I think oftentimes VC is a very shoot from the hip, apprentice style, learn as you go kind of process. And I think both the class kind of formalized a lot of the what there is to learn. And I think Battery also, just as a firm with, you know, seven different sites, over 40 different professional investment professionals, they really had to formalize their process as well. And so I had a great experience with the team there in San Francisco. Me specifically, my experience was more project-based. There was a very specific area within healthcare that my GP wanted to learn more about. So it was less kind of doing due diligence on the fly and more kind of going deep and trying to find insights about a specific arena. And that meant I got to own it a lot more specifically. So that was really great. So yeah, that's my experience, and I'll hand it over to Dan.
Thanks, Annie. So I spent the SFI internship with Altos Ventures. They're a wonderful host firm, fully integrated me into the team while I was there. And I think a big part of that was being in person. So I guess my main guidance would be, you're going to know your host firm by November 9th, and it would be probably best to reach out and set up a cadence of one-on-one meetings, virtual coffee chats, and get some sort of structure for the time you're out there, because it does go by quickly. And DM, you're next.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Professor Helzer. Wow, Professor Weiss. It's so good to see this mini VC lab reunion happening online. But yes, so I interned with Foundation Capital. I applied as an international student, and Polsky Center really helped me figure out the visa issues. There was a question in the chat about whether international students can apply in the first year. You can. And I worked with Altos Ventures over the summer, and I literally never met the team, but they were so awesome, and so they integrated me so well into their work that I didn't feel I needed to be in person. So most of the opportunities and most of the VCs, because they're small teams, you will have ample opportunities to interact virtually as well. Yeah, and currently I'm working with Menlo Ventures for the fall quarter.
All right, thank you, everyone. I see Professor Weiss has been helping tackle some of the questions that we have here in the chat. A few questions about bringing in firms not listed for the San Francisco initiative. If there is a particular firm with which you have a relationship based in the San Francisco area, you are welcome to email us and bring that up for discussion. We keep the San Francisco initiative a bit smaller to maintain a certain capacity of cohort as we build this program. But with that said, if there's a particular firm of interest, we can evaluate that with the faculty to determine if they may be approved to move forward. For the traditional lab, there are some questions as to whether we are limited to Chicago-based firms, given the remote nature of the traditional lab. I will answer that briefly and give you a quick plug for an info session that we are holding for the PEVC Lab on Monday. Please tune into that one and register through the Polsky Center website. But we will have a petition process that is formalized where students who are curious about bringing in a firm from a different region will be able to fill out a petition form that would be evaluated by faculty and determine whether it will be approved. So additional details to come on that in Monday's session. Let's see. Someone is asking about what criteria a VC is evaluated by to be approved by the Polsky Center. As mentioned, we've built out a formal process for petitioning what we call the Bring Your Own Firm, BYOF element for the lab. In that, we ask for criteria about what sorts of work you'll be doing with the internship, how much of it will be focused on direct investing experience in other categories. And then we review that information along with an understanding of kind of who you'll be reporting into and what that structure looks like with the faculty to determine approval. We want to maintain the integrity of this program and have it be focused majorly on direct investing experience as opposed to portfolio management or portfolio company support. So those are elements that are taken into consideration. Also in line with, you know, the nature of the firm itself, et cetera. So please stay tuned for that information. There's additional details on that on the Polsky Center website and the new petitioning process. For students who are looking for kind of the work approval for international students, there is a new attestation form that's built out to show verification that the student has worked with the Office of International Affairs, OIA, to secure the appropriate CPT prior to starting their internship experience. This initial contact with OIA has to happen very quickly after you are accepted into the program and offered an internship. And then we'll need verification that the process to secure your CPT has been initiated with OIA prior to the start of your internship. So all of those forms will be made available through the Polsky Center website. And for students who that criteria aligns with, we'll be in touch with you with specific next steps. We have a question about for part-time students. Are there recommendations for what type of scheduling flexibility is needed for the internship? That is a great question. We have found that within this program, there is a considerable amount of dedication, especially when it is in person, to travel back and forth and to balance this internship opportunity. Are there any students who, from our panel, that might want to chime in on this effort as it relates to, part-time students, or just kind of the workload suggested for students as a whole, given your experience in this program? Putting you on the spot. DM, I see you come off mute.
So I think it's best if they reach out to Evis Drenova, who interned with me at Foundation Capital. He was a part-time student. He had a job in Chicago. He was doing classes over the weekend, and he still did the VC Lab in SF. From his experience, it seemed like it was doable, and he picked 3 classes, I think, during that quarter. So it is doable, but I think it's best that we defer this question to Evis.
Unfortunately, Evis was unable to join in this session, but I'm happy to provide some of his perspective and confirm whether he's willing to have his contact information shared in the follow-up with slides from today's session. I think that's a great question, though, that then applies also to full-time students. So would any other students want to provide their suggestions as to how to balance a course load in the quarter with which you're interning in this program? We understand that, the answer to this changes ever so slightly given the lack of travel this year, but still think that that would be some valuable advice to students who are considering applying. Charlie, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, well, on the part-time thing, it's very doable, but again, I can only speak to my experience at GGB, but there was really only 1 to 2 meetings per week that were fixed in stone. The rest of them was more meeting with entrepreneurs where I could jump into or not take them. I tend to lean towards taking everything I possibly could, but that's completely up to you. So I'd say like the work people facing, you can't really control. But a ton of the work that you're going to do, like sourcing or working on diligence, portfolio support, you can kind of do on your own time as long as you get it done. So it's easier to manage. In terms of the workload, like it all depends on what your priorities are. I mean, in my case, I wanted to work at GGB. I was super pumped and I wanted to continue on indefinitely. So I treated it like an extended job interview, and classes in school and classmates definitely took a back seat to that experience. But that was just what I prioritized. And during the program, I only took 3 classes and like super easy classes. I was just on cruise control. But that's what I prioritized. I think that you can do it by putting up better guardrails around and setting expectations up front with kind of what you want with the firms. And I think that's really important to do regardless. But it's definitely manageable, but realize like you won't be able to go to TNDs. I guess we're not doing that, but there's less student stuff that you can do if you're really committed all in on the VC thing. So you just got to figure out for yourself what works, and you can make it happen.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Another question we have is from a student curious about why the emphasis on pursuing a career in the Bay Area long-term, if we can elaborate on that a bit more. Ira or Jason, would either of you want to tackle that one? If not, I'm happy to chime in.
I can chat a little bit about it since I was the one that commented on it. I think this program is really set up around, trying to facilitate our students to develop a network and to get jobs in the Bay Area. And so because of that, I think if you're just looking for a job in VC, but if you're looking for a general job in VC, the Chicago program is probably better for you because you'll get more kind of local on the, a little bit more on the ground experience. Whereas we really think that both from the student perspective and from the firm's perspective, that this program is really geared toward people who, think they want Bay Area focused careers, at least post business school, right? Maybe, the long term is a different story, but at least for the, 5+ years post business school. I think otherwise it would be hard for both participants to get out of it as much as they might want. So.
Yeah, and to emphasize the both participants piece, one of the things that we talk to the firms about is that this is also a pipeline for people to hire into their firms. And so we're sending them candidates that really are just looking for exposure to the industry, but don't have an earnest desire to work in San Francisco. We're not fulfilling what we're trying to accomplish for the firms as well. So that's another dimension to it.
Thank you both. We have a question regarding the selection of host firms for this program. We have someone asking to explain why there's a particular focus on seed firms given the wide variety of VC in the Bay Area. Given that this is the second year of this program, we are targeting first some of the firms with which we have very close relationships. As such, there happens to be a trend towards those that are seed firms, but not to say that with the expansion of the program, we wouldn't then have a wider variety of firms participating in future years. Jason, Ira, anything that you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe my comment is, I think, while there might be an emphasis towards seed firms, a lot of the firms last year were not necessarily, seed focused firms. Like, GGV, as an example, historically has invested later, although they've gone earlier in recent years, but more, Series A and beyond. And that's probably true for Foundation as well. And Sapphire, historically probably primarily invest Series C and beyond. And so I think, I'm not sure how we got to the seed focus, but my view would be like some of these firms will certainly be investing well beyond seed.
Yeah, I'd also say
it's also true. Battery invests like every stage. When you're a multi-stage firm, they can invest anywhere from seed up until I would say pre-IPO. And for the multi-stage firms, seed is pretty rare to be their entry point. Most of them like the entry point to be Series A.
Yeah, I mean, we've done our best to have a variety of firms. We're focused on firms that are great firms. It's going to be a great experience for the interns. And certainly last year, our first year, we focused on firms where there was a connection to Booth and to know that, to really ensure there's a great experience. This year we're expanding beyond that. And while a lot of them are personal relationships that Ira and I have, so, I hope everyone does a really good job on their internships. Otherwise, we'll hear about it. But in any event, we've done our best to try to add that variety. At the same time, we're constrained with a small number of firms. We also don't control who says yes or no. And this is an interesting year because on one hand, we have some firms that are distracted with things related to the new world that we live in. And on the other hand, we can expand it to some interesting firms that wouldn't have been able to participate if it was in person. So we have a lot of different factors that are all shaping which firms are going to be participating. We don't have 100% control over it either. And so we're doing our best to add some variety and to try to match the interest of the students as well.
Thank you both. We have another question related to the internship experience that I'd like to open up for the students on our panel to address. Perhaps starting first with Charlie and going down the line from there. I can go back to the lineup of folks here. this question is getting to, how much was your role identified prior to the start of your internship in terms of what projects you were working on? Did firms already have a clear view as to what your role would be on their team and what they wanted from you? Or was it more malleable and identified as you went on through the time? So if we can, start with Charlie and go down the line of our panelists, we'd love to hear your perspective on what this was like for your particular experiences.
Okay, so I'll answer the first part of your question, which is how much of a say did you have on what you worked on and what your role was? I mean, I'd say 0%, just because they have an idea of what I'm going to be working on coming in. But I will say, like, if you're interviewing with firms and throughout the interview process, like the folks that you're talking to are going to have a focus that they're interested on, and they're most likely going to select people that have similar interests or can add value to what they're interested on. And so in some way, you can kind of choose on what you're working on based on who you're talking to. But like once I got into the role, there was not much say. But GGV had a very clear vision of like a few project deliverables. And then the rest of it was kind of what I did above and beyond of just trying to involve myself with as many people in the firm as possible. Maybe working on another thesis that they've mentioned once or twice, but never took action upon it. So there was a clear role of what they wanted me to do, and then my responsibilities just sort of grew as I took more on. And it was really nice of them to give me that freedom to do so. So that was my experience, but I'll pass it on to Annie next.
Yeah, I guess I would say that, I mean, each firm and really each person that you're talking to is going to have their own unique perspective. I would say that for my experience with Battery, I was working with two partners, and Chelsea was really intrigued and wanted to leverage my prior experience in healthcare investing. And so that was kind of an in there. But my second interview with Sanjeev, it was more just focused on view of the industry. And I think that I got, really rigorous questions about, just thoughts I had around interesting companies, particular sort of ideas or theses that I was working on. And so having those ideas really developed helped them sort of get a sense of how I might fit into what projects they were envisioning. I mean, I think a big part of this is getting a sense of the type of work that each of these firms do. Battery is very SaaS and software heavy, so having a point of view in that space or having some experience in that space is really helpful. And then beyond that, giving them a sense of how you think is also just super helpful as well. Because the finance is part of it, but ultimately it's really about, if you hear about a company and how you react to it and the questions you might ask and how you investigate it, that's all only going to come out in presenting how you think.
So in my experience, yeah, the role and the deliverables were clearly defined. I would say look at that as quite a positive view on your experience, because if it was unstructured to some extent, you'd be looking for work or not have as robust of a relationship with your teammates or understanding of the work and the expectations. So yeah, that was a really good opportunity. And then if you're doing things ahead of time and delivering ahead of schedule, then there's more capacity to move into areas of interest that you have in particular. And if you have an advocate within the firm, they'll make that happen.
So my experience was entirely different. I had absolute freedom to basically pick and choose what I worked on. The first couple of weeks, so Joanne, my mentor at Foundation, so she asked us to attend the team meetings and figure out for ourselves, like, what part of the enterprise SaaS space interests us. So the first 2 weeks, we basically researched and figured out what investment thesis and what space we will be focusing on during the winter quarter. And then based on our interests, we were also looped into meetings with founders and other investors. So it was a lot of, the onus was on us to engage with the team, engage with founders. So it can be different for different people. based on the firm. And to a certain extent, I think that helped me because a lot of the VC job profile is to be okay with ambiguity and like structure your, sort of like formulate your own structure. So I think that experience helped me, and I definitely thrive in such environments. When I worked with Altos, they already had like a clear structure, which was also interesting and helpful, especially given it was completely virtual. So yeah, it depends on the firm and depends on your profile and your interest. And if you do want to engage further, especially, for example, if you think you bring some unique perspective which can help their portfolio companies, do share it. For example, my co-intern Evis, he's now joining one of the portfolio companies of Foundation as to lead their business development. So even that is possible. So just be proactive about it would be my suggestion.
Thank you all. Being mindful of time, we have one last question that I'd like to bring to our panelists in rapid fire succession. So once again, starting with Charlie, if each of you could speak to what percentage of your work was sourcing versus diligence versus modeling and other. So if each of you could just kind of give a quick breakdown as to what distribution of time you had in these categories, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, I'll just speak to the winter quarter because I think that's most applicable. I would say like 5% sourcing, maybe 40% diligence, another 5% modeling, and the rest was thesis building. For that quarter, that changed, but yeah.
For me, it was kind of all research and analysis for my winter quarter, just really diving into trends in the healthcare space from a very data specific perspective. And the follow on that was 100% sourcing and any diligence that resulted from sourcing.
Yeah, my experience was about 80-20, 80% diligence, 20% sourcing.
My experience was 40% sourcing, 40% research, and 20% portfolio help.
Thank you all.
Basically.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We are coming up on time, and it appears as though that is one of the last questions we have in the chat. So let's go ahead and go to this page here with contact information. We are identifying the TAs of the VC section of this course, which will be announced soon and added to the Polsky Center website. As mentioned, faculty members, Professor Jason Heltzer and Ira Weiss oversee this program and the VC section of the lab. And then myself and my colleague Erica Mercer support on the application and matching process, as well as the engagement for this for the student cohort and the host firms over the winter quarter. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us directly. We will circulate these slides and a recording following this session. And again, a reminder of the deadline on October 12th. The application will be live on the website soon. So I'd like to thank our panelists for first taking part in the pilot year and trekking back and forth to San Francisco and being amenable to altering your experiences a bit to migrate to remote work towards the end of that quarter. To the faculty members for their support of this program and ongoing support of making the San Francisco initiative as robust as possible for all of the students. And to all of you for joining. For those of you who are new to Booth, welcome. We hope you engage with other programs through the Polsky Center and keep an eye on our website and events page for various info sessions on programs that might pique your interest related to private equity, venture capital, or entrepreneurship. So thank you all, and we will look forward to reading your applications for those of you who choose to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Nora. Bye.